Alright, here I've got a table I built when I was in high school. It's pretty old, I'd say it's probably about 16 years old at this point. I mean, I built it when I was 16 or 17, so that's about right. Um, it's been beat up over the years. I took it to college with me and stuff like that, so it's pretty beat up. And you can tell too. I built it when I was 16, so things like that. Like it wasn't perfect by any means, but it's a cool table. So I'm gonna try to sand it down a little bit. I'll probably end up restaining it, just trying to make it look nice again. So I was starting out here just by putting a little bit of tape around the very edge of the the wood where the tile started, just because I was afraid that sanding I'd scratch the tile, which it ended up being pointless anyways because I couldn't really use my sander on that edge because it was so thin, and it's just a oscillating sander, so it's hard to control on it. If it was an orbital sander, it might have been a little easier to control on it, but I ended up just hand sanding it in the end. But I still did it. I did it anyway. So when I started sanding, I was actually a little worried because I almost thought I was gonna mess up the table because I was using 80 grit sandpaper, and I mean it was just like ripping off the old finish that was on there. So like it was taking it off really fast, and I was just a little nervous that I was gonna ruin it, but it ended up working out. And when I sanded it all the way up to 320, it was super smooth and it felt really nice. So I ended up being pretty happy with it. I am just doing a voiceover with this because obviously the sander is noisy. It's not the best room for sound, and there's also a furnace in this room, so that kicks on occasionally. So I just have the audio of the sanding lowered a little bit. But I mean, I also have it sped up so that it's not an hour and a half of sanding, because I think total, if I would have left all the clips full length, it would have been like 2.5, 3 hours long, which obviously, who wants to watch that? So I sped it up and made it a little better. Now coming up here, I actually have an old piece of cabinet that was left in the basement of this house when we bought it, and I ended up sliding that over and putting the table up on top so I don't have to kneel and squat and bend over to make this work. It ended up being much better and easier to sand. So here I started hand sanding the little routed edges just because it wasn't possible to get my sander in those spots. Um, it wasn't obviously ideal, but once you have a finished piece of furniture, it's kind of hard to re-sand it all down and finish it again, because typically you sand down the pieces before you assemble. And once you route an edge, you don't usually, I mean, you might hit it with like light sand just to make sure there's no rough edges, but typically you don't re-sand something that's been routed. So I was just kind of doing it to get the finish out of the groove, but other than that, that was really all I could do. So I knew I mentioned this in the very first clip that wasn't actually a voiceover, but I made this in high school, and I mean I graduated high school in 2008, and I didn't even make it my senior year. I think it was my junior year that I made this. So I mean that was 2007, so that's 15 years ago, right? Yeah, roughly 15 years ago. So I mean it's pretty old. It's been through its paces. Like I said, I took it with me to college where I went to school in Florida. It was in an apartment with me and a bunch of my friends. It got beat up for sure. Things were spilled on it, whatever. So it needed to be done, and gave me something to do and record a video of it even. So But again, it's also just something I like. I enjoy doing things like this. I enjoy woodworking and just products. I wish I could do bigger scale things, but I don't have the space or the tools for that. So hopefully someday I will, but right now this is really all I've got. But again, it was just a high school project. I didn't have a whole lot of time to work on it when I was in high school because my classes were an hour and 20 minutes long, but still, I only had this class for half the year, so roughly 90 days out of the school year, an hour long, which we didn't even have the full hour to work on it 90% of the time. So it wasn't possible to get it perfect. And I noticed when I was sanding that there was a lot of like saw marks from not from me, but from when the wood was like milled and sawn in the planks. There was just a lot of saw marks that I didn't get out originally. So I had really tried to sand those and get those out to make it end result look nicer. And I got most of them, but some were still just hard to get out. And with it already being assembled, it's just hard to sand those pieces down as smooth as you can get them without, putting marks in other edges of the wood. So, and like I said, the sanders, it's just, I don't really like oscillating sanders, but it's just what I have. And it'd be nice to have an orbital sander that's, battery powered so it doesn't have a cord, but and I also feel like you get a nicer finish from an orbital sander, but I just I don't have one, so that's what I had to use. And so now here I had noticed that this leg was a little wobbly, so I was drilling little pilot holes, which this bit is it's meant to drill a pilot hole and countersink so you can put a plug in, but the bit wasn't very long, so like it wouldn't have gone all the way through into the leg. So I just drilled the hole first, and then I countersunk it separately. So then I could run some screws in and tighten it up. I think I added three. I added one on this side and two on the other side because there was already a screw. There was already a plug with a screw in it on the side that's facing the camera. So I only really need to put one in there, and then I put two on the other side just to give it a little bit more strength. Now the screws I use here, I think were just like 1.5-inch drywall screws, so like they weren't, obviously ideal, but I had them right here, so I just threw them in there, and it's all it really needed. It just needed a little bit of extra support, so that ended up working out, and I didn't see the need to get any different screws because like once I put in these two here, it doesn't wobble at all. I don't know why this one was so wobbly. All the other ones were completely solid, so this one just must not have. Maybe I didn't glue it. I don't know. I mean, I was like 16 when I made this table, so who knows what 16-year-old Adam did at the time. I think I also had this class. This was my first class of the day, so it was at like, 8 o'clock in the morning, so I was just tired, probably. Young and tired. Basically half-assed everything. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm messing with something. Oh, I guess the bit. So now here's my real messy work table. I had I don't remember. I don't know the size of the dowel. Maybe it was a 1/4 inch or 5/16. I don't know. But anyway, this is just a dowel I had, and it fits the hole of the countersink I have. So I just hacked off a couple little pieces and glued them in there. I really need to clean up this table. It's pretty bad, but it's just I'm the only one that goes in here. And I'm the only one that even goes in my basement for the most part. So this is just my personal little space that I just kind of end up throwing things, which is really unlike me because I'm actually a very well organized person. I like things to be, neat and organized, but this room for some reason is just not. So maybe I'll clean it up here someday. I need that. This um, workbench that's here is so rickety. It was something that was just in the house when we bought it. It's so bad. I'd love to build a better one, but right now wood prices are still just crazy expensive. So it's not something I plan on doing anytime soon. And this table works. It's just rickety and whatnot. So now I've cut out the plugs, and I realized my wood glue that I left it out in a room that's not insulated or heated. So it, obviously wasn't stored at the proper temperature. It was all like, it was literally, I don't know how, what's the, I mean, not, it wasn't really jello-y. It was like, um, it was weird. It was very thick, and like you could have cut it with a knife and it would have held its shape. Like it was wild. I've never seen anything like it. So this is all I had. It was just super glue, the Gorilla brand, and all it was doing was holding in these little wooden plugs. So I figured it was good enough. They're not going to come out. They're in there. So I didn't care, and it actually sanded pretty fine, and the stain took to everything, so there wasn't any like residue. I made sure to keep it inside the hole so it didn't squeeze out the top. So it didn't. You can't tell that there was super glue there. So anyway, I was going around here because the top trim piece was held on just by brad nails, and after I sanded it, I could see some of the heads, so I was making sure I popped them back in with just a little, whatever those things are called, like a nail head tap thing. And then I filled them with stainable wood filler. I think I actually end up finding more later on in the video, but so now I'm sanding down the dowels so they're flush. And this one I left a little bit too long, and it was literally just shredding the sandpaper on my sander. So I ended up taking the hacksaw and hacking it off a little better so it wasn't as hard to sand. Yeah, Adam, you're dumb. But once I did this and did get it sanded flush, it looked really good, and the leg didn't wobble anymore. So now I believe I moved up to 220. I think I skipped 180 because honestly, I don't. Who likes sanding, and I felt like it was just pointless to do 180. So I went to 220 next. Sanded the whole thing down again everywhere. At least this time I rotated the table instead of walking around the table. So yeah, I found some more. Either I found more or they ended up popping out just because I was sanding more. clearly there was more that I either missed or whatever. So now I'm filling all the holes. And I believe I let this dry overnight. I don't think I worked on it anymore this day. This leg was a little. Yeah, the Dowels poplar. So this might be poplar because it actually matches very well. It's kind of surprising. But I mean, again, it's my own table. I don't really care that much. I just want to make it look a little nice again. I also some of the little like brad nails that are holding this trim piece on were showing their heads because I've sanded it quite a bit. So I just kind of popped them back in a little bit more and filled the holes with some stainable wood filler. So again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just something fun to do. So after video Adam just repeated everything voiceover Adam has already probably talked about, I'm back to sanding again. I believe I'm sanding to 320 here. So this was the last bit of sanding that I had done. So I figure I'll mention this now since I don't really have anything else to talk about. At the very beginning of this video I don't have a hat on, and I meant to because I always wear a hat usually. Well, not when I'm at home, but if I'm ever out I wear a hat because, I'm losing my hair on the top of my head and I'm a little self-conscious about it. So I usually wear a hat, and I had forgot to put one on in the first part of this. When I first started working on this, and I realized it later, so then that's why I have a hat on in all the other clips. So again, sanding all the little tiny routed grooves and finished edges, the paint. So now I had flipped the table back over and I started sanding the top edge that I didn't do originally because it was too hard to do with the palm sander. So I just had a little piece of wood wrapped around, or the sandpaper wrapped around a little piece of wood, and it just made it easier. Um, Now the top of the table has a mosaic tile top, and at the time when I was in high school, my small town had just gotten a Walmart and a Lowe's. So my shop teacher went to that Lowe's and had asked them if he could have all their broken tile. So then they gave it to him. So then we were supposed to make a mosaic tile top just by taking the broken tiles and smashing them up even more. So that's what I did, and I actually was really proud of mine. And my teacher was like, he thought mine was really well done as well, and showed it to everybody, like all the other art teachers in the school. And I'm not a creative artistic person at all, at least with, drawing and things like that. But I mean, I guess I'm artistic when it comes to this kind of stuff. I don't know. Still an amateur for sure. Definitely no professional when it comes to woodworking and stuff. I just enjoy doing it. Now I was just taping up the top here to try to keep stain from getting in the grout. I mean, the grout is sealed on the top of it, but I still didn't want it to get down in the. I was just trying to avoid it, and I did get a little bit on it, but it looks fine. Didn't make much of a difference. Either way, taking the time to tape it was definitely worth it, just because it kept the stain out of the grout for the most part. Now I use Jacobine. I don't know how to say it, but that's what I used. A lot of the wood in my living room now, like I have a couple shelves I made. I made a mantle of my fireplace, and it is all stained with this. So I had it on hand. Figured it would be nice that it matched everything else, so that's what I used. And I'm a fan of dark wood anyway, so I like the dark stain. Now I started here with the top, which I probably wouldn't have done it this way. I don't know, maybe I would have still done it this way. I mean, it was fine. But I did the top trim piece, and then I end up flipping the table over and doing the rest of it. So I guess I would have still done it this way. At the end of the staining is what I probably would change, which I'll mention that when we get there. I actually kind of enjoy staining. I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of satisfying, like wiping it off. So this video is sped up, but the stain was probably on there for 5 minutes or so total. And it honestly looks much darker in person than it does on the video. So I was just wiping off the excess that had run around the edge there so it wouldn't dry. And then I stained the whole rest of the table here. I just also want to mention this is not a closed off room. It is actually very open. So I wasn't worried about the vapors or anything. And also, it only took me really like 30 minutes to do this, so I wasn't even in there very long. But I mean, it's ventilated enough that I wasn't in like a closed off room. I mean, I know that door is kind of closed, but the other side of the room is open, and there's a whole space you can walk around to the other side, and then the whole rest of the basement. So it's a pretty large space for what it really looks like it is. And I obviously didn't stain the underside part because it's just a piece of plywood that the tile's glued onto. So like there was just no point staining that. No one's gonna see it anyway. I mean, I guess I could have not stained the inside part there too, but that didn't see why not. Now I put a little bit there because there's a spot where I guess 16-year-old me let glue squeeze out and I didn't clean it off very well, so it's just, it won't take stain there. So, I mean, I don't know what else it could be. I sanded it like crazy and it still wouldn't take the stain, so I'm not sure what the problem was. Now this is what I wish I didn't do. I flipped the table back over here, and I wish I didn't, because in the spaces, like, stain ran down in between where the legs are, like up against that piece of wood there. And when I flipped it back over, like, I had wiped it all off pretty well, but when I came back down later to check on it, there was one of the legs. Some of the stain that was in there had dripped and ran all the way down the leg, and it kind of dried on it. So there's unfortunately one little spot where there's like this thicker bit of dry stain on it, and you can't really get it off. I mean, I could have sanded it, I guess, but at that point, I had already been working on this table for a couple days when I could, and I was kind of just over it. So I wiped it as hard as I could, and some of it came off, and you can't really even tell unless you're looking for it. You're not gonna be able to see it, but I wish I wouldn't have flipped it back over. I should have just left it upside down, because I ended up actually even re-sanding the top edge at one part, because when I had put on the polyacrylic, I started with it upside down and I was going to do the top edge last, and some of it had dripped around and there was a thicker bit, so I sanded it down. So I should have just left it because I could have fixed the top anyways if I had to sand it. But regardless, it's whatever. It didn't look that bad in the long run. So now I only filmed one coat of this because I didn't think it was necessary to film multiple videos, but after the first coat I let it dry, actually like completely overnight, which you only have to wait 2 hours, I think. And then I light sanded it with, it recommends 220, but I used 320, so I just lightly sanded it with that and then wiped it all down again. And then I did 2 more coats, same process. I put it on, sanded it with 320, wiped it down, waited 2 hours, or waited 2 hours after it dried, sanded it, wiped it down, then did another coat, and then the last coat. It says to sand it again, but I didn't, because when you sand it, it gives it like this weird matte look, and I wanted it to be glossy, so I didn't sand it the last time, and I'm glad it didn't, because it looks good in my opinion. So that's pretty much it. I mean, this is obviously only the first coat, but I did do it 2 more times, the whole process. And obviously I didn't record me doing the top edge and sanding that, but I mean, that's basically, once I had flipped it back over, I sanded the top edge a little bit. I actually had to restain it in a couple spots, and then I let it sit overnight again, and then I finished the top edge the same way I did it. I did it 3 times actually, still on the top. I think I actually spent more time doing the polyacrylic than anything, because you had to wait for it to dry and sand and dry and sand, the whole process. So here it is, pretty much finished. We'll get a final picture of it with some better light here, but I mean, it's all right, not bad.